It's funny how a single night can split your life into a before and an after. One moment you think you know your place in the world, that no matter how much it hurts, you're part of something. Family, love, belonging, even if it's always been one-sided, you hold on because you think maybe, just maybe, the next day will be different. That one word of approval will finally fill the gaping hole that's been carved into you since you were young. But when the truth finally lands, sharp, merciless, and impossible to ignore, it doesn't just sting. It changes everything. And once you feel that shift, there's no going back. Quick reminder, most of you aren't subscribed. If you enjoy this, hit subscribe and like now, then let's get back to the story. Hi, my name is Maya Carson. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I went from being the invisible daughter of the Carson family to finally becoming someone who chose herself, even when it meant walking away from everything I thought made me whole. I wish I could tell you this is a happy family tale, that I'm the kind of daughter whose sacrifices were appreciated, whose efforts were acknowledged, whose parents and siblings stood around her with warmth and pride. But let me be brutally honest. Being a part of my family was like being the understudy in a play where the lead actor never falters. My older brother, Daniel Carson, was that lead, the golden child who could walk into a room and be greeted with admiration, respect, and boundless praise. He was the brilliant attorney, the one whose victories defined our family's pride. My parents adored him as though he were crafted from rare glass. And me? I wasn't fragile, valuable glass. I was duct tape. Always patching, fixing, holding things together in the shadows, my sacrifices taken for granted. I lost count of how many times I heard the same question from my parents, their voices sharp enough to slice, "Why can't you be more like Daniel?" Each word sank deeper into me, a wound I pretended didn't hurt because I thought silence was strength. I thought if I took it all without breaking, I'd prove my worthiness. But silence doesn't earn applause. It earns absence. And that's exactly what I got. The slap of reality didn't come when Daniel got another award, or when my parents bragged about him at the neighborhood barbecue while conveniently forgetting to mention that I existed. It came when his wedding rolled around, a massive event that my parents insisted I manage single-handedly. Venue, catering, flowers, music, every detail fell onto my lap. I told myself this was my chance. My final audition for a role I'd been denied for years. If I could pull off the perfect event, maybe they'd finally see beyond the smudges of disappointment I seemed to wear in their eyes. I dipped into my savings, cutting corners on my own stability to fund their dream. Vendors were booked, deposits were paid, nights blurred into early mornings as I mapped seating charts and haggled with florists. But no matter how hard I worked, Daniel pushed for more. Imported orchids. Champagne is so expensive it could have paid my rent for months. Bands that demanded travel fees twice the size of the budget. Every time I said no, his face twisted like I'd insulted his very existence. My parents, Joyce and Leonard Carson, predictably rushed to his defense. "He deserves the best, Maya," my mother would scold, sipping from her wine glass with that look of disappointment that had long since become her signature. "Don't mess this up for him," my father muttered from behind his newspaper. Too cowardly to meet my eyes. I should have seen the tidal wave forming. Should have known it was only a matter of time before it crashed down on me. But denial is a powerful drug, and I was hooked. I convinced myself that the only reason they were harsh was because they expected greatness from me too, that they were waiting for me to finally prove myself. I wish I'd realized sooner. It all came to a head the night before the wedding. Picture this. The Carsons gathered around the dinner table. My mother had made roast beef, though nobody ate much. The air was heavy, that precursory stillness before thunder cracks. Daniel, as always, controlled the room, rattling off a list of last-minute demands as casually as if he were ordering takeout. Lobster tail, vintage champagne, a celebrity photographer. Maya. "Make it happen," he said, not even glancing at me. Like I was some nameless assistant rather than his sister who had already poured $10,000 of her own savings into his perfect day. This time I told him no. Firm, steady, final, and that's when the earthquake came. "You're always cutting corners," Daniel snapped. My mother slammed her glass onto the table. He's right. This is his one day, and you're ruining it. My father glanced up with disdain, his voice gruff. Don't ruin this for your brother, Maya. And then the words that will never leave me, long after their echo dies. The greatest gift you can give this family is vanishing forever. Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. My fork clattered against the china, my chest tightening so hard it felt like my ribs might collapse. For a second, I thought I'd beg. I thought the old version of me might reach for scraps, tears burning as I whispered, I'll do better. But I didn't. Instead, I stood. My chair screeched against the hardwood floor. Fine, I said, my voice shaking but audible. If that's what you want. I grabbed my keys. My mother hissed, Don't make a scene. But the only scene left was the one of me walking out. The door slamming shut behind me like a full stop punctuating a sentence I hadn't realized I'd been writing for years. That was the moment I stopped being duct tape. And yet, the story doesn't end with me driving off into the night, victorious and free. No. The next morning, the day of the golden wedding, was when everything they thought was unshakable began to collapse, and I wasn't there to hold it together. But let me pause here, because to understand what happened at that wedding, you need to know how far this pattern ran. It wasn't just about wedding deposits and overpriced champagne. It went back years to another crossroads where I gave up my own future to carry theirs, and they thanked me by erasing me. Years earlier, long before Daniel's wedding, I had the opportunity that could have catapulted my career as a freelance marketer. A regional supermarket chain offered me $45,000 to revamp their ad campaign. For a young woman in her early 20s trying to make a name in a ruthless industry, this was my golden ticket. Independence, credibility, financial security, everything I'd dreamed of. But then the phone call came from Erie, Pennsylvania, where our family grocery store was collapsing under the weight of overdue bills and dwindling customers. My mother's voice cracked as she pleaded for help. My father, usually stoic, confessed defeat. They were drowning. And like the dutiful daughter I was, I stepped in. That meant surrendering my contract, walking away from $45,000, and diving headfirst into saving their dream. I launched a grassroots campaign, flyers in neighborhood mailboxes, jingles on local radio, rough but genuine ads on early social media platforms. I befriended vendors, charmed skeptical customers, stretched every dime until it screamed. The result? Within months, the store was bustling. Foot traffic surged, debts were paid, and the Carsons were no longer in danger of losing everything. I told myself this was it. This was when they'd finally see me. But when my parents gathered us around the kitchen table one night to announce leadership of the store would pass to someone, my heart lifted until they named Daniel. He has the head for business, my mother said proudly, as if the lawyer who hadn't lifted a single bag of groceries knew more than the daughter who had rebuilt their business from the ground up. You did your part, my father muttered, sipping coffee without looking at me. Daniel smirked, already criticizing my campaign as basic. That was all I got. A smirk, a dismissive nod, and silence, and that was the blueprint. I gave everything. They gave nothing back. So by the time Daniel's wedding came, and I poured in my money, my time, my hope against the wall of their endless demands, I should have known better. But now you see why I couldn't let go, why that desperate part of me still believed maybe this time. Because once, long ago, I'd already sacrificed my future for theirs. But like I said, the wedding day wasn't the triumph they expected. As they smiled ready to bask in Daniel's spotlight once more, they had no idea that everything was about to unravel before their very eyes. The morning sun broke over Erie in a quiet, indifferent way, as if it didn't know, or perhaps it didn't care, that this was supposed to be the biggest day of my brother Daniel's life. I watched its golden light creep across my bedroom floor from where I sat on the edge of my bed, my suitcase half packed and waiting by the door. Their words from the night before echoed in my skull. The greatest gift you can give is vanishing forever. I'd spent half the night tossing, staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe I'd misheard, if maybe I was exaggerating. But each time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on my mother's face. Cold, sharp, immovable. My father's indifference stung even more. They hadn't said those words in anger. They'd said them as though it was logical, reasonable. As though excising me from the family was simply another task on the wedding checklist. I reached for my phone, opening my banking app. The sight of my savings, every last cent of $10,000 tied up in deposits for Daniel's wedding, boiled my blood. It wasn't just money. That nest egg was years of skipped dinners out, freelance nights spent chasing invoices, exhaustion that nearly broke me, all to gift Daniel a stage to stand on while they applauded. And now I was supposed to walk away broke and broken, discarded like a stain nobody wanted to own. I don't know what snapped inside me. Anger? Clarity? Maybe both. But in that quiet moment, I vowed I wouldn't let them bury me so easily. The first call was to the caterer. "This is Maya Carson. Cancel the order," I told the receptionist, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. "I'm rescinding payment." There was hesitation, confusion, a mention of penalties, but I held firm until arrangements were made. Next was the florist. "No roses. No arrangements, refund, then the band." They tried to push back. They'd already cashed my check, but I knew my rights. I demanded a chargeback, and by the time noon rolled around, I'd clawed back most of my savings. Piece by piece, I stripped Daniel's fairy tale down to its bare bones. No lobster, no champagne, no string quartet, no imported orchids. When guests arrived that evening expecting a spectacle, they would find only a hollow stage. As I moved through the motions, I didn't feel guilt. Only an odd cleansing calm. They wanted me gone. Fine. But I wouldn't leave behind the pieces of myself they'd demanded as tribute. By mid-afternoon, the collapse had begun. The first storm of frantic phone calls came from the venue. Then Daniel's fiancée, Lindsay, her voice shrill and trembling. "The florist says you canceled? Maya, what did you do?" I didn't answer. I let the voicemails pile up like a wall. What could I say? That after a lifetime of being invisible, this was my one undeniable signature left on their perfect day? That this wasn't revenge, it was survival? Instead, I left my phone buzzing on the table while I loaded my car with the essentials from my apartment. The second wave came as guests arrived at the reception hall. Nathan, my best friend, would later describe the scene to me over the phone with barely contained laughter. Tables stared bare without centerpieces. Guests milled about in confusion with no music to guide them. The buffet stood empty, abandoned when the caterer pulled out. All around, a low tide of whispers spread. What happened? Where's the food? Didn't they hire a band? Daniel, red-faced and sweating through his designer tux, snapped at staff, demanding explanations they didn't have. Lindsay teetered on the edge of tears, clutching her gown as relatives shifted uncomfortably. My mother paced in stilettos, her smile a brittle mask as she hissed into her phone. My father sat in the corner, quietly fuming, too stunned to act. And the whispers grew louder. By the time the third round of calls hit my phone, it wasn't panic, it was fury. First from my mother, "Maya, what have you done?" "You've humiliated us!" Then from my father, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. "You are a disgrace to this family." And finally, Daniel, spitting venom like never before. "Jealousy won't change who you are. You ruined the best day of my life." Each voicemail left a mark, but not the kind they intended. For the first time, I didn't shrink. I didn't race to explain, to beg them to understand. I turned my phone face down and let the weight of their disappointment slide away, brick by brick. Later that evening, Erie's gossip mill churned into full throttle. Daniel took to an online community forum, writing a scathing post painting me as the villain of his tragic wedding. He called me jealous, unhinged, spiteful, a parasite in his words. My mother replied beneath his post, backing his narrative with a chilling tone. "She's always been like this. Always disappointing us." My father didn't post, but silence, as always, was its own weapon. Comments poured in from neighbors, strangers, church members. What kind of person sabotages family? One wrote. Another called me selfish. Another labeled me pathetic. With each refresh, another stranger weighed in on a story they didn't really know. I sat in my dark apartment reading it all, my hands trembling at first, then steadying as truth clicked into place. If my family could destroy me so publicly, if they could spin me into a monster without hesitation, what was left for me here? What tie was I still clinging to? That's when I opened a new browser tab and typed, Asheville, North Carolina apartments for rent. I remembered the one trip I'd taken years ago. Mountains so green they seemed alive, air crisp as a reset button. It had felt like another world. A world without the name Carson attached like a chain. I picked up my phone and dialed a realtor. Something small, I said quietly. I'm starting over. By midnight, I had booked a one-way bus ticket. Just like that, Erie, my family, their betrayal, their collapsing empire, became the past. As I taped boxes shut later that night, Nathan stopped by. His knock was hesitant, his face grim when he saw me crouched on the floor amid stacks of packed belongings. They're trashing you online, he said, slumping into a chair and pulling out his phone to show me Daniel's post. It's brutal. I know, I said softly, sliding another book into a box. Are you okay? For a moment, I didn't answer. The lump in my throat was too big to swallow. Finally, I lifted my chin. I'm done with them. Nathan's eyes softened. He didn't argue, didn't try to convince me otherwise. He just sat with me in the quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. After a while, he put a hand on my shoulder and said, You're stronger than they'll ever know. That was the moment I realized he was right. By dawn, my decision was sealed. I wasn't just walking away. I was cutting the rope completely. Within a few weeks, Asheville would be my new home. But before I boarded that bus, there were still final strings to sever. Because leaving wasn't just about geographical distance. It was about reclaiming what was mine. And that meant one last move that would send the Carson family into free fall. And trust me, when it came crashing down, it wasn't just a wedding that collapsed. It was everything. By the time the wedding fiasco became the talk of Erie County, I was already unraveling the last ties that tethered me to the Carson family. Walking away from the chaos was one thing, but if I didn't reclaim what I had poured into their world, I'd never truly be free. You see, the family grocery store, the Carson Market, had survived its death spiral only because of me. I'd poured not just time, but thousands of dollars into a sinking ship while my brother Daniel basked in accolades for rescuing something he hadn't touched. When my parents pushed the business into his hands, I told myself I'd accept the humiliation because it was still our legacy. But standing on the edge of my new life, I realized I had no obligation to prop up a structure they'd locked me out of. So one gray morning, with steam rising from my coffee, I made the call that finally cut me loose. I withdrew the $5,000 investment I had made into Carson Market during its darkest hour. A decision as sharp as sliding a knife through a rope. No warning, no emotional family meeting. Just a quiet transaction and an email to the bank confirming it was done. If they wanted me gone, then fine. Let's see how they ran things without the glue they never even noticed holding everything together. The ripple was immediate. Within a week, vendors began murmuring among themselves. Payments that had once been punctual under my watch were suddenly late. Daniel, clueless in the role of manager, couldn't negotiate a delivery if his life depended on it. Shelves began to go bare. Customers drifted in with empty baskets and left frustrated, shaking their heads. I should have felt happy, triumphant even, watching from the sidelines as the empire they once prized began to rot from the inside. But what I really felt was vindication. It wasn't about revenge, it was about proof. Proof that I hadn't been crazy all those years. Proof that I hadn't been fabricating my role or exaggerating my value. I had been the backbone. Without me, the Carson Market didn't stand a chance. Nathan, my best friend, kept me updated with texts sprinkled with dark humor. They pulled sweet pickles, restocked with sour. You'd think Daniel was reinventing the wheel. Supplier walked out yesterday. He demanded they honor the Carson family name. They laughed and left. There's a sign on the door today, closed for inventory. That translates to, we're drowning. His updates were a strange mix of healing and haunting. Part of me wanted to laugh, but part of me ached, remembering how many nights I'd spent creating radio ads, designing flyers, planning promotions that had saved those same aisles. Those shelves had been my battlefield, and the hum of the register had once been my victory song. Watching it collapse was like seeing a stranger live in a house you built, tearing the beams apart one by one. But the Carsons never did see the collapse coming. Not really. They had spent their lives with Daniel as the crown jewel, assuming the world bent for him, believing their favoritism was destiny rather than delusion. Pride made them blind, so when the business finally declared bankruptcy 3 months after my departure, they didn't apologize or reevaluate. They lashed out. A furious email from my father landed in my inbox the very morning I arrived in Asheville. His words were stilted, seasoned with that mixture of bitterness and cowardly blame I knew too well. Your decision ruined us. Without your selfish withdrawal and cruel sabotage, we would still be thriving. Selfish, that word cut deep. For years, selfishness had been the ultimate crime in our family, a synonym for failing to sacrifice yourself for someone else's comfort. They weaponized that word anytime I wanted something for myself. But this time, I let it roll off me, because here's the truth. I wasn't selfish. I was finally free. Asheville welcomed me in a way my family never had. My new one-bedroom was small, sun-flecked, furnished only with thrift store finds and the 2 suitcases I'd lugged aboard the Greyhound bus. The mountains stretched like old giants in the distance, blue and eternal, reminders that life had much bigger horizons than the narrow streets of my hometown. I started small in my freelance work. Clients came slow at first, a boutique cafe that needed a new ad campaign, a local bookstore desperate for fresh graphics. I emailed, I cold called, I handed out business cards at every farmer's market. Word began to spread. For the first time, every ounce of work I poured in came back to me with gratitude instead of silence. That's about when I met Shirley Bennett. Shirley ran a bakery on Main Street, warm light spilling from its windows, shelves stacked with cinnamon rolls and crusty loaves, and laughter that always seemed to hang in the air. The first day I stumbled inside, clutching my laptop after a long hunt for Wi-Fi, she took one look at me, smiled, and passed me a free scone with my coffee. "You look like somebody who's carrying too much," she said kindly. "Eat that. It helps." It did. Shirley had a warmth that disarmed me, a presence that asked for nothing in return. She told me her own story between wiping counters and laughing with regulars, how she'd rebuilt her life from scratch after a divorce, how she'd slept in her car some nights before the bakery finally turned a profit. She didn't pity me when I mentioned moving to Asheville for a fresh start. She simply nodded like she understood in her bones. "Sometimes you've got to burn the old house," she said, sliding another coffee my way, "just to see how much light was stuck inside you all along." Those words stayed with me for weeks. Meanwhile, gossip trickled in from Erie like unwelcome smoke. Daniel's law career was floundering. His fiancée Lindsay had quietly broken off the engagement, and my parents had been forced to downsize into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town. Their fall from grace was swift and merciless, neighbors whispering behind their backs the same way my family had once whispered venom about me. Did part of me ache? Yes, but not for them. For the version of me that had once shouldered all of their burdens and believed it was love. That naive, desperate girl deserved better. And slowly I was giving her better. I began to grow roots in Asheville. Real, healthy roots. I hiked trails with a weekend group, rediscovered painting in watercolor journals, filled my window with plants that thrived under sunlight I finally felt I deserved. Money was still tight, but I wasn't bleeding myself dry for people who hated me. Each paycheck was mine. Each choice was mine. Then, months into this new life, the letter came. My mother's handwriting scrawled across the envelope, shaky but unmistakable. Inside, a plea. I'm sick. We need you. Your father can't handle this. Please come home and help us rebuild. For a few hours, my chest caved. Old loyalty reared its head, clawing at me. The ache of being wanted, even manipulatively, nearly undid me. But then I remembered Shirley's words, Nathan's steady voice, the countless nights I'd wept into silence while they praised Daniel's shadow. I read the letter twice more, breathed deep, then sat at my desk and wrote the shortest reply of my life. I wish you well. But I'm not coming back. One sentence was all it took to sever decades of chains. That night, handing the letter to Shirley as she closed her bakery, I asked if I was being cruel. She read it, looked me dead in the eye, and said, No, Maya, that's not cruel. That's closure. Her certainty was the anchor I needed, and as I walked home through Asheville's glowing streets, I felt not like someone vanishing, but someone finally beginning to live. You'd think that writing a single sentence, I wish you well. But I'm not coming back, would feel small compared to years of pain. And maybe on paper it was 16 words written in my neatest cursive, sealed in an envelope that would take only 2 days to travel back to Erie. But in my chest, those words detonated like dynamite. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just choosing myself in silence. I was saying it to their faces, printed, final, undeniable. When I dropped the letter into the blue mailbox on the corner of Main and Chestnut Street in downtown Asheville, my hands were trembling. At first, I wasn't sure if it was fear or relief, but as the postman came by in his satchel and carried it away, I realized something. I had just sent away the last trace of their power over me. Whatever happened next wasn't theirs to dictate. It was mine. Those next months in Asheville weren't glamorous at first. They weren't the shiny new life moments you see in movies where the heroine rents a big loft and instantly becomes successful. No, mine was real. Messy. I lived in a rented one-bedroom with thin walls where I could hear my neighbor practicing trombone at odd hours. My mattress was secondhand. My dining table had one wobbly leg. But you know what? Every corner of that apartment hummed with something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. No one barged in demanding I fix their problems. No one sneered at my efforts. No one measured my worth against Daniel's perfection. Every imperfection in that little place was mine, and it made the air sweeter than any lavish home I'd ever sat in back in Erie. Work was a grind, yes. But slowly, and this time with genuine reward, I started building. The word freelancer carries a lot of stereotypes. Aimless millennial with a laptop in coffee shops, people assumed. But I knew how to grind. I'd cut my teeth pulling impossible campaigns out of thin air for my family's grocery store, so designing ads for Asheville's coffee roasters, craft breweries, and boutiques felt attainable. Hard but attainable. Word of mouth was my lifeline. Every ad that brought a coffee shop 3 new customers turned into 3 referrals. Every flyer that helped a bookstore sell out at a reading night turned into more trust and more work. What floored me wasn't just that people paid for my skills, it was that they thanked me for them. The first time a client looked me in the eye and said, "Maya, you saved my business," I almost laughed. Saved? I'd done this before for my own family, and back then the only repayment I'd gotten was silence and dismissal. Now, I was valued. Still, starting over meant long days of hustling, long nights sketching logos under the glow of my desk lamp, and budgeting like a hawk. I learned to stretch $30 into a week of groceries and told myself the occasional meal at Shirley Bennett's bakery was a justifiable luxury. She disagreed, insisting I sit, handing me muffins and calling them on the house. I stopped resisting when I realized she wasn't pitying me. She was feeding me like a friend. Shirley became something I'd never really had before, an older sister figure. She didn't ask about my family right away, but she saw the weight I carried. Whenever I looked at the scuffed floor or paused too long staring at my phone, she'd sigh and mutter, "Ghosts again?" And I'd nod. Somehow, she always knew without asking. "I've been where you are," she said one night as we sat in her bakery after hours, sipping tea while the ovens wound down. "You think you broke something by walking away, but the truth is it was already broken. You're just finally refusing to bleed for it." I wanted to believe her, but guilt is like a stubborn echo. It doesn't just vanish because you left the room. And then the shadows of Erie found new ways to reach me. Emails. At first, short bursts of venom from Daniel. "You disgust me? You'll regret what you did to this family." Then longer ones, bragging about how he'd bounce back, detailing every fictitious injustice I had done. I deleted most without reading. But sometimes late at night, his words crawled under my skin. My old habit kicked in, the urge to defend myself to prove my side of the story. I'd type a long response about the tens of thousands of dollars and hours I'd sacrificed, about his arrogance, about the store that wouldn't have lasted 6 months without me. But before pressing send, I'd stop. Sending those words wouldn't convince him. It wouldn't matter how much evidence I gave. In his eyes, I'd always be the expendable sister in the shadow of greatness. So instead, I dragged those unsent drafts into the digital trash bin and doubled down on what I could control. My life here. But Erie wasn't done. One Saturday, as I was roaming Asheville's downtown market, the mountain air crisp against my cheeks, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. The voice, raspy and pained, was my mother's. "Maya, your father and we're losing everything. Your father's been unwell, and without you, I don't know what to do. Please, come home. We need you." The ache in her tone hit me like a sucker punch. For a moment, I stood frozen between stalls of handmade jewelry and pottery, clutching that phone like it held a lifeline. Isn't this all I'd ever wanted? To hear my mother finally say, "We need you"? But as I listened again that night, curled on the couch of my apartment, Shirley's warning came back to me. People don't change overnight. I could see the manipulation dripping from those words, the way she dangled desperation like bait. The timing was too convenient. Their collapse aligned perfectly with Daniel's failings. They hadn't wanted me until it served them. And now, they weren't asking me to come back as Maya. They were summoning me back as their scapegoat, their duct tape, their sacrifice. So I wrote back brief and final, "I wish you well, but I'm not coming back." For hours after sliding that envelope into the Dropbox, doubt clawed at me. Was I cruel? Was I really leaving them to suffer without me? But when I showed Shirley, she just nodded in approval. "That's not cruelty, Maya. That's you refusing to go back into the cage." Nathan agreed on the phone the next week. "Don't let their crisis become your crisis. You gave them everything and they treated you like nothing. This time, save yourself." His words, too, struck deep, because for the first time I truly felt I was doing just that. Saving myself. Asheville rewarded my stubbornness. My network grew. A brewery contracted me for a major rebranding campaign, which led to gigs with an art gallery, then a hiking equipment shop. The projects piled up, challenging but invigorating. Money was still modest but consistent. Every time I deposited a check that had my name written on it, not Daniel's, not Carson Market's, I thought of the years I'd handed over my brilliance for free. Those days were gone now, and yet, sometimes in the quiet, the question still pressed at me. Had I truly escaped, or was Erie's shadow still clinging? Because every success in Asheville seemed to make me glance backward, wondering if they could see me now, if my parents sat in their dim, cramped apartment whispering about the daughter they had banished. The suspense of it hung heavy. Would they try again? Would someone show up at my door? Would one voicemail flip the fragile peace I had finally built? I didn't know then, but the story wasn't finished. And the next twist would test just how far I was willing to go to protect the life I was carving out. Alone, but finally free. There's a strange thing about building a new life. You don't always notice at first when the old one has stopped chasing you. At least that's how it felt for me. For months, I braced for another email, another call, another calculated plea from my family in Erie. I expected their shadows to stretch across state lines, wrapping around my fragile peace like vines breaking through walls. But then, nothing. The silence was eerie at first. My mother, who once filled my inbox with criticisms disguised as advice, had gone completely quiet. Daniel, whose rants had once arrived daily like uninvited newspaper deliveries, no longer appeared in my notifications. Even my father's disdain, which usually came with grim periods of silence broken by sudden scorn, had evaporated altogether. Instead of relief, I felt unsettled. Because silence from the Carsons was never just silence, it was strategy. And in the quiet of my little one-bedroom apartment, I wondered what they were planning. But life doesn't wait for you to dwell too long. Asheville had a funny way of tugging me forward at exactly the moment I'd start looking back. It started with a text from Shirley, the bakery owner whose laughter had practically adopted me. "Bring that fancy marketing brain of yours to the shop tonight," she'd written. "You'll thank me later." Curiosity pulled me in, though I almost canceled out of habit, my old tendency to hide whenever family ghosts took up space in my mind. But I went. When I arrived, I found Shirley's bakery buzzing after hours, the long wooden tables crowded with local business owners. There was the couple who ran the independent bookstore, the guy behind a new craft beer label, a woman who custom-made hiking gear. Shirley grinned at me, shoving a steaming mug into my hands. "Network, kid. You're one of us now," she said. That word, us, lodged in my chest like a warm ember. I hadn't realized until then how much I missed belonging somewhere. Not the toxic belonging of blood ties, but the kind where people looked at you and said, "We want you here." That night, between bites of crusty bread and laughter echoing off the bakery walls, I landed 2 new clients. The bookstore wanted an ad campaign for a local author's signing. The hiking gear shop asked if I'd help them redesign their online presence. Both contracts together meant another $2,500 in my pocket, a bigger payday than I'd seen in months. When I walked home under Asheville's string-light skies, my feet nearly skipped. For once, my worth wasn't invisible. For once, people didn't need me to cut myself open to prove loyalty. They just wanted me for the skills I had worked so hard to sharpen. The projects consumed me in the best way. I spent late nights sketching designs, running test copy through focus groups, snapping photos of gear on mountain trails for social media accounts. The bookstore's author signing turned into such a packed event that the line stretched out the door, winding down the block. The hiking gear shop doubled sales within a month of launching their new website. For once, I felt like my name meant something more than leftover scraps after Daniel's victories. People said Carson Market, with disdain now back in Erie. But in Asheville, they said Maya Carson. "Oh, she's the one who turned our sales around." But just when I started to believe the ghosts had finally faded, life proved me wrong. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, at the height of tourist season. Asheville was buzzing with out-of-towners, local musicians filling the downtown streets with banjo music, food trucks lining curbs. I was at Shirley's bakery, laptop open, finalizing ads for a brewery's festival weekend, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Pennsylvania area code. My body froze. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, heart thudding, half hoping it would stop ringing. But it didn't. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Maya." The voice was gravelly, faint, but unmistakable. My father, Leonard Carson, every nerve in me went rigid. He never called. Ever. Growing up, every word from him was filtered through my mother, or delivered in sharp grunts at the dinner table. Hearing him say my name with no buffer, felt like stepping through ice. "I know you don't want to hear from us," he said slowly, his tone oddly brittle. "But things are bad here." I stayed silent, staring at the reflection of the bakery window. My pulse raced, but I didn't speak. "The store's gone. Your mother's health isn't good." He coughed, a hollow sound. "We made mistakes. Maybe too many, but..." He paused so long I thought the call had dropped. Then quietly but firmly, "Daniel can't fix this. We need you." Those 3 words, "we need you," were everything I thought I'd longed to hear. They were the begging echoes of my teenage years when I hoped for even a sliver of validation. But now, Now they sank in my chest like stones. Was it real? Or just another manipulation? Different wrapping, same dagger? "I'm not coming back," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. Silence stretched between us, heavy, strangling. And then he said something that chilled me deeper than any insult ever had. "Maya, if you walk away this time, there will be nothing left of this family. Nothing." Then the line went dead. I sat there for what felt like hours. Shirley's voice somewhere in the background calling for more coffee refills, chatter of customers around me. But in my head it was only his words. There will be nothing left of this family. Were those words truth? Or were they another emotional noose meant to drag me back into their cage? All I knew was this: I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. That night, I paced my tiny apartment until my feet ached. I replayed his voice over and over, a broken record, wondering if this was genuine desperation or just the final act of manipulation. I wanted to hate him, to shut it out, but part of me still ached. Part of me still remembered the child who wanted her father to choose her, just once. But here's the thing. Even in the middle of my spiral, life didn't stop. The brewery festival I'd planned for weeks was looming, deadlines stacked against me. Clients trusted me. People here depended on me. Not because I was their daughter, their scapegoat, their shadow to the golden boy. They depended on me because I'd earned it, and for once in my life, that weight felt right. By the time the festival weekend came and the brewery's downtown block swelled with record-breaking crowds, something shifted inside me. I stood in the center of it all, camera slung over my shoulder, snapping shots for social media while families clinked glasses and musicians strummed. My banners flapped above the outdoor booths. My slogan was scrawled across every pint glass customers carried. This festival wasn't Daniel's, it wasn't Leonard's, it wasn't Joyce's, it was mine. And in that noisy, joyful chaos, I realized a truth I hadn't been able to face. If my family wanted to destroy themselves, that was their choice, but their ruin didn't have to drag me under anymore. Still, as the night sky filled with lights and the roar of applause from the stage carried through the streets, I felt the seed of unease twisting in my gut. Their voices might have quieted for now, but deep down I knew the Carsons weren't finished with me. Not yet. Success has a strange taste when you've never had it to yourself before. In Erie, every achievement I'd ever touched was twisted into Daniel's halo, erased like my fingerprints never belonged there. But in Asheville, for the first time in my life, people celebrated me. After the brewery festival that put my campaign banners all over downtown, I walked home through the festival's lingering music. Hands full of free beer tokens and a bouquet of wildflowers a vendor shoved into my arms with a grin. My body was exhausted, but my chest burned with something rarer than joy: belonging. People had laughed under my slogans, lingered at booths I'd organized, toasted to nights I'd made possible. Every dollar that changed hands that night had been nudged by my effort, my vision. For the first time, I realized I wasn't invisible anymore. But just when light finally broke through, Erie's cold shadow slithered back in. The next morning on my doorstep I found an envelope. Stiff, thick, real. Not the digital venom I'd grown used to. The handwriting clawed at me instantly. My brother's. Daniel. How he'd gotten my address I had no clue. Probably through some paperwork trail or sheer determination. He'd always been that way, relentless when it came to bending others into his orbit. My pulse jumped as I slid it open. You may think you've cut ties, Maya, but family is blood. That doesn't vanish just because you stomp your feet and run away. Mom is sick, Dad's getting weaker, and you left. You abandoned us when we needed you most. Do you sleep at night? They talk about you here. Everyone does. They say you betrayed your own blood. And they're right, but you can still fix it. Come back and I'll forget the disaster you caused with the wedding and the store. Come back and we patch things up. But if you stay gone, don't expect you'll have a family to come back to when you change your mind. The arrogance in his script hit like poison, as if absolution was his to grant, as if his failures could still be converted into my sins. But what unsettled me wasn't the criticism or the manipulation. It was the hook at the end. Don't expect you'll have a family to come back to. He was right about one thing. There was no family left for me. The part of me that had shaken with guilt every time I turned my back on them was now starting to quiet. Because the truth crystallized with every line of his venom. I wasn't the one who walked away. They had thrown me out first. I tore up the letter, piece by jagged piece, until it was scraps on my kitchen floor. But even as I swept them into the trash, a strange unease sat heavy on me. Because Daniel wasn't easily ignored. He never had been. The very next day, another ripple hit. I'd just finished a client call when my phone lit up again. Not Erie, not Daniel. This time it was Nathan. My best friend, still up north. His tone was steely. "Maya, you need to know something." "What now?" I asked, bracing. "They're talking about you." "Your family?" "I overheard people at the old cafe saying your mom's been telling everyone you robbed the business blind before you left. That you stole money from the store to fund your little escape." The coffee in my hand went cold. "What?" She's spinning it hard. "Says you bled them dry, ran to Asheville with their savings, left them in ruins." People believe her. You know how folks are here? They'd rather cling to gossip than truth. I pressed my forehead against the wall, fury and nausea battling in my chest. Robbed them? I'd sacrificed everything for them. I'd cut my wings the day I gave up that $45,000 contract years ago. I'd kept the store breathing when it was already flatlining. The idea that I'd stolen from them was madness. Nathan's voice softened. "I told you they'd twist anything to keep their grip. You left, Maya, and that means they'll drag your name through the mud until they choke on it. I think you need to prepare yourself. This isn't ending soon." We hung up, and for hours I just sat there, staring out my apartment window at the blue ridge, the peaks blurred behind my tears. I had rebuilt my life, brick by fragile brick, but Erie was determined to throw stones at every foundation I laid. And yet, here's the part no one saw. I was tougher now. Their lies still hurt, yes. Their betrayal still left bruises. But in Asheville, I wasn't just bleeding alone. I had allies, Shirley, Nathan, even miles away. My clients who trusted me, the hiking friends I'd joined on weekend trails. So instead of crumpling, I channeled it. Their venom became gasoline for my fire. I worked harder. Within 2 months, I secured a regional tourism board contract worth more than anything I'd touched back in Erie. They wanted me to craft a campaign drawing travelers into Asheville's mountain trails, breweries, and art scene. The scope was scary, but the money, nearly $25,000 over 6 months, meant I could breathe deeper than ever. I poured everything into it. Long nights sketching mountain silhouettes into logos, mornings writing taglines that whispered adventure, afternoons shooting clips of trails and waterfalls. And when the campaign launched, I watched billboards and bus stops bloom with my words, my images. Asheville buzzed with visitors. Hotel bookings surged. The tourism board sent me flowers, actual flowers. And still, in my inbox, Daniel sent bile. None of this matters. People up here know who you really are. For the first time in my life, I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked his number. The silence afterward wasn't empty this time. It was powerful, because something shifted inside me then, a realization so sharp it nearly split me in two. I didn't owe them my life anymore. I didn't owe them answers, explanations, or even my pain. They had their story, and I had mine. And though their gossip spread like wildfire in Erie, here in Asheville, I was known for something else. For creating, not breaking. For building, not stealing. For shining, not vanishing. But deep down, even as I built stronger roots, there remained the lurking truth I couldn't ignore. Families like mine don't just fade quietly. They come back. They claw, they hunger. And I knew it was only a matter of time before the Carsons tried again. The question was this: when they did, would I be ready to slam the door for good? By the time summer slipped into fall in Asheville, my roots here felt stronger than I'd thought they could. The air grew crisper, the leaves painted the mountains in shades of fire, and my life for once seemed to hum with its own rhythm. My morning started with coffee at Shirley's bakery, afternoons overflowed with client meetings, and evenings often ended walking alone through the streets of downtown, just to soak up the sound of buskers playing guitars under golden street lamps. For the first time in as long as I could remember, my chest didn't feel like it was caving in every time I woke up. But peace in my life had become like glass. It could gleam brilliantly in the light, but it was fragile. One sharp flick, and it could shatter. And with my family's fingerprints always somewhere on the glass, I knew it was only a matter of time before they tapped it again, hard enough to crack. That tap came in the most humiliating way possible. I was at a small business luncheon in Asheville, invited by Shirley, who seemed determined to keep pulling me into the local community. Between bites of salad and polite networking chatter, one of the guests, a man with a thick New Jersey accent who ran a vineyard, sat down at my table. "Carson, right? You've been making waves with that tourism board campaign. Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, smiling, feeling that strange flicker of pride rise again. But then he leaned in conspiratorially, his voice dipping lower. "So tell me, is it true what folks are saying online? About the family mess in Pennsylvania? Something about fraud? A lawsuit?" My fork froze midair. I kept my expression neutral, something I'd mastered growing up under my mother's critical eye. But inside, my stomach turned to stone. "What lawsuit? What fraud? People talk," he continued, shrugging. "I don't buy all of it personally, but I figured I'd just ask. You know how reputations are in this business." Later that night, back in my apartment, I went digging where I swore I never would again. Local eerie message boards. And there it was, staring me from the screen like an open wound. Thread after thread, where my brother Daniel, my mother Joyce, and even neighbors I'd once smiled at painted their version of me. Maya siphoned money from the store. She sabotaged the wedding out of jealousy. She betrayed her own parents who gave her everything, and then at the center of it all, Daniel claiming that a lawsuit was pending against me, though no such thing existed in reality. Each comment piled on, spitting venom with every keystroke. The lies spread like fire, suffocating. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding in my ears. Even 1,000 miles away, their reach was finding me, twisting into a weapon that could strike down everything I was building. My hands shook as I thought of clients Googling my name and finding lies before they found my work. What if they believed it? What if the fragile trust I'd rebuilt here started to crumble because of stories I couldn't control? The next day, while reviewing ad photos in my apartment, I debated every option. Do I respond publicly? Do I expose the whole truth? The years I saved their store? The sacrifices I made? The savings I poured into Daniel's wedding before they told me to vanish? Do I scream my story into the same abyss they used to smear me? But once again, Shirley's voice stumbled into my mind. Steady and grounding. Ghosts don't need feeding. Maya. When I told her about the rumors later that afternoon over the counter of her bakery, she raised a brow. "They want your energy. Don't give it to them. People here see the work in front of them. They're not fools." Easy words, but my blood still boiled with unfairness. Why was it that they got to rewrite history so freely while I had to bite my tongue in dignity? That night, Nathan called. He'd been following the same boards. His voice was thick with frustration. "They're relentless, Maya. Every time I think the trashing slows down, it starts up again. Worse than before. I even saw cousin Lorraine chiming in now, repeating garbage like she was there." I laughed, bitter and exhausted all at once. "They're building a whole mythology, and I'm the villain in every chapter." "Maya," Nathan said, his voice cutting through like a blade. "You don't have to stand in their theater. You've already walked out. Let them keep clapping for their lies until they choke on the silence. Focus here. Focus now!" His words echoed long into the night. So I shifted. I poured into my clients with even more energy. I threw myself into another wave of contracts, one with a local outdoor gear manufacturer, another with a bed and breakfast desperate to resurrect its slow season. Word spread through Asheville's small business network, not about lawsuits from Erie, but about how every project I touched seemed to glow afterward with new life. I learned to drown out the noise. But deep down, I knew this battle with the Carsons wasn't truly over. Their silence would never last long. Every lie, every bitter twist of my story was a reminder of the family I'd lost. Or maybe the family I never had to begin with. But then something unexpected happened. One evening at Shirley's bakery, after the shop had closed and the smell of cinnamon lingered in the air, she leaned across the table with eyes sharp as I'd ever seen them. "Why don't you take this thing you do, for all of us local folks, and make it bigger? A real agency. A place where other creatives could work with you. You've already proven yourself." Her belief startled me. An agency? Me? It had always been safer to be the quiet freelancer, invisible behind the brands I propped up. Daring to make my own something, staking my name and face on it, that felt terrifying. Like handing my fragile glass piece to the same hammer that had always hovered above me. But maybe that terror was the point. Because wasn't that what my family had taken for decades? My courage? My boldness? My belief that I could be more? The next morning, I filed the paperwork for Blue Peak Creative, my own small marketing agency. The name nodded to the mountains that had become my refuge. Word spread quickly. Clients were thrilled, some signing long-term contracts right away. A graphic designer I'd met at one of Shirley's meetups asked if I needed help. Suddenly, I wasn't just hustling alone at my kitchen table. I was building something that belonged to me, something my family couldn't erase. But even as I typed the name Blue Peak into contracts and saw it on letterheads, I knew a storm was brewing behind me. Families like mine don't watch quietly when the scapegoat dares to thrive. And sure enough, 2 months later, that storm came knocking. Not with words on a message board or rumors whispered in eerie bars. This time, it landed on my doorstep, flesh and blood, looking me dead in the eyes. It was a chilly Thursday morning in Asheville when the past came pounding, literally, on my door. I had been up late the night before finalizing a new pitch for Blue Peak Creative, so I was still in pajamas, hair a mess, clutching my mug of half-cold coffee when the knock came. It wasn't a polite tap or a friendly rap. It was sharp, impatient, the kind of knock that makes your stomach drop before your mind even catches up. For a second, I told myself it was probably a delivery. Maybe Shirley dropping off one of her new muffins to test on me like she often did. But when I peered through the peephole, my breath caught. Daniel. There he was. My older brother. The golden boy who had never once been told no by my parents. The man who'd sneered while I bled for the family and still called me ungrateful. He stood on my porch in a pressed suit, hair gleaming like he'd just stepped out of a courtroom, though his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. Against instinct, I opened the door. The cold air rushed in, sharp against my bare arms. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I expected. "I didn't invite him in?" "You weren't answering my emails," he replied, his tone clipped, his jaw tight. "So I came to make you listen." The brazenness of it hit me hard. 1,000 miles hadn't stopped him. He'd tracked me down, followed me here, just to stand on my doorstep and invade the one safe space I had built. "Daniel," I said slowly, gripping the door tight. "You need to leave." His smirk curled, familiar, infuriating. "Is that really how you greet family? After everything?" "After everything," I snapped back. "That's exactly how I greet you." His expression flickered, but only for a second. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "You've made your point. You left, you got your little life here, fine. But things back home are falling apart. Dad's sick, Mom's worse." His eyes locked on mine, trying to soften. "They need you, Maya. I need you. You can't just pretend we don't exist." His words pressed down on me like weights. For a flicker of a moment, the child still hiding inside me wanted to believe it. That after all this time, maybe there was some shred of sincerity in him. But then I remembered his posts, his venom, his lies about me stealing from the store, tanking his wedding. His face twisted in satisfaction as Mom and Dad told me to vanish. That wasn't love. That wasn't family. I straightened my shoulders. "You don't need me, Daniel. You need someone to fix the mess you made. Again, and I'm not doing it." A dangerous glint sparked in his eyes. Do you even know what people are saying about you back home? You're a thief, a coward. Everyone knows you robbed us blind and ran. Something in me snapped. You want to talk theft? Let's talk about the $45,000 campaign I sacrificed to save that store years ago. The debt I cleared with my own money. The months I poured into your wedding while you demanded more until I had nothing left. And what did I get, Daniel? A pat on the head? No, I got told the best gift I could give was disappearing. So congratulations, you got what you wanted. I'm disappeared. For the first time in years, he didn't have a retort ready. His mouth opened, then shut again, his polished lawyer mask cracking. Rage surged beneath his skin, visible like heat waves. You think you're so much better now? He hissed finally. Because you've got some lame office in the mountains drawing logos for coffee shops? Don't kid yourself. You're nothing without us. You always were. The old me, Shadow Maya, Duct Tape Maya, would have caved then. Would have believed him, doubted herself, begged for a sliver of his validation. But this Maya, the one who had built Blue Peak Creative, who watched her campaigns light up downtown Asheville and put dollars in local pockets, she stood taller. I met his words head on. That's the thing, Daniel. I'm not without you anymore, and I've never been freer. His teeth clenched. He stepped forward as if testing the boundary of the door still cracked between us. If you don't come home, Maya, there will be consequences. The cold steel in his tone sent shivers up my arms. Like what? Another smear post? Another lie about me stealing your glory? Go ahead. It won't change the truth. And with that, I stepped back and slammed the door in his face. The sound reverberated through the apartment, shaking me to my core. But I leaned against it, chest heaving, pulse racing, not in fear, but power. For the first time ever, I hadn't shrunk under Daniel's shadow. I had pushed back. Through the peephole, I saw him linger, fists clenching, before storming off down the stairs, muttering into his phone. No doubt calling Joyce or Leonard to spin his version of what just happened. When his car finally pulled away, I sagged against the door, my knees nearly giving out. Later that night, I recounted the scene to Shirley as she handed me a steaming mug of chamomile tea in her quiet bakery. Her jaw clenched tighter with every word. He showed up at your door? She repeated, incredulous. That's not family, Maya. That's a wolf at the door. Nathan echoed her fury when I told him over the phone. He's desperate. They're all desperate, and desperate people get dangerous. You need to watch your back. His words haunted me later as I lay awake, insomnia clawing at the edges. Asheville had been my sanctuary, but with Daniel's shadow lingering in town, would even this place stay clean of them? Still, as fear needled me, another thought burrowed deeper. Maybe this was the test. Maybe this was the universe asking whether I was truly ready to stand tall, or if I'd fold, retreat, and repeat history. I wasn't going to repeat history. Not this time, but deep down, even as resolve hardened, the question gnawed at me. Daniel had warned of consequences, and if experience had taught me anything, it was this. When my family decided to retaliate, they never hit softly. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. After Daniel's visit, I half expected him to fade back into Erie like a bad dream. That's what I wanted to believe, that his little outburst had been one last desperate grasp before he finally let go. But I knew my brother. Daniel never let go. He squeezed until something broke. And this time, what he wanted to break was me. It started small, almost invisible. I noticed it one Tuesday morning while reviewing a client's website analytics. A spike in strange traffic from Pennsylvania, hundreds of hits with no leads, just people clicking around before bouncing. At first I brushed it off. The internet is full of noise after all. But then the messages started. Anonymous emails trickled into my Blue Peak Creative inbox. Subject lines like fraud alert or do you know who you're hiring? The body of the messages always the same. Links to forums, screenshots of rumors, short paragraphs accusing me of theft, sabotage, cruelty. They were riddled with lies, deliberate distortions of my past. Some even claimed my parents were bankrupted by me, that I had stolen thousands from them to fund my escape. The lies were grotesque, exaggerated, absurd. But here's the ugly truth. Lies don't have to be believable to plant doubt. Within weeks, I sensed the shift. A cafe owner I'd been negotiating with grew distant, emailing back slower, her tone clipped. A bookstore client nearly pulled out of a retainer contract until I spent a full meeting convincing her my reputation was intact. And then, one afternoon, the tourism board, the pride of my new portfolio, called an urgent meeting. "Some concerning rumors have come to our attention," one board member said, folding his hands on the sleek mahogany table. His voice was polite, professional, but his eyes carried suspicion. "We've received emails, anonymous, of course. They suggest your work here was built on less than ethical means." My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream that this was Daniel, that this was my parents, that this smear campaign had been dismantling my name for years. But in that room, with professionals staring down at me, I had to keep composed. "My track record is here in Asheville," I said firmly, laying out reports, analytics, client results. "Every dollar I've earned honestly. I can't speak for whoever is spreading these lies, but the work speaks for itself." They nodded, flipping through the reports, murmuring their agreement with numbers so sharp they couldn't be denied. The contract wasn't pulled, but as I left that meeting, a sick truth hardened inside me. My family hadn't just followed me to Asheville. They were actively trying to drag me back into their pit of destruction. That night, I sat in Shirley's bakery after hours, the comforting hum of ovens filling the silence. I told her everything, about the emails, the meeting, the threats. Her weathered face grew firm, her fists tight against the table. "They're trying to poison the well," she said flatly. "They can't stand that you're thriving without them. So they're trying to starve you until you crawl back. Don't you dare." "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. "What if clients keep doubting me? What if they destroy everything I've built here?" Shirley leaned across the table, her eyes fierce. "Then you build stronger. You plant deeper. You refuse to let their shadows touch your light." Nathan, when I told him over the phone later, was less poetic, but just as firm. "If they're going nuclear, you need to armor up. Get legal protection. Put your boundaries into action, not just words." But even as my friends urged me forward, the assault escalated. One morning, I woke to find Blue Peak Creative's new website hacked. The homepage splashed with crude messages: thief, liar, fraud. My stomach turned as I clicked through pages defaced with accusations only the Carsons could have written, dragging old family photos into the carnage. It was personal, punishing, deliberate. The humiliation burned. Despite quick fixes and reassurances to clients, I felt stripped naked, vulnerable. Like Erie's vines weren't just creeping in the window. They were choking the very air inside. And then the true blow landed. It was Friday afternoon when Shirley called me, her voice trembling with anger. "Maya, you'd better get down here. Now!" I rushed to her bakery, the bell chiming as I shoved through the door. She pointed wordlessly to the front window, where a flyer had been taped in the night. My body went cold as I read it. Bold black letters screamed, "Ask her who she really is. Maya Carson destroyed her family. Don't let her destroy yours." Below, grainy images of my parents' shuttered grocery store, a photo of Daniel in his law office, heroic and posed. And worst of all, an old picture of me at the store, exhausted, face smeared with sweat, taken during one of the long nights I'd sacrificed everything to keep them afloat. It was vile. It was invasive. And it was public. Customers clustered outside, murmuring. Some looked at me with pity, others with unease. My sanctuary, the bakery that had offered me light, laughter, fresh bread, suddenly felt poisoned too. I yanked the flyer down, crumpling it in my fist, heart hammering like it would break through my ribs. Shirley put a hand on my shoulder, steady though her own jaw shook with fury. "They crossed a line," she said. But as I stood in that bakery, eyes stinging, adrenaline coursing, another thought cut deeper, sharper, truer than fear. They wanted me humiliated. They wanted me begging. They wanted me crawling back on my knees. No, not again. Not ever. They think they can take everything I've built here, I said, almost to myself. The words shook but steadied with each breath. But I'm not the duct tape anymore. I don't exist to patch up their cracks while they shatter me. I'm done. Shirley's eyes shone with pride. Good, then it's time to fight back. Not with their poison. With truth. That night, as I sat in my apartment with a blank document open on my laptop, I realized the decision that loomed. For years I'd swallowed silence, believing dignity meant restraint. But what if dignity, this time, meant telling the world everything? The sacrifices, the betrayal, the endless erasure. If my family wanted to make my story public, maybe it was time to truly make it public, but on my terms, not theirs. The question was, did I still have the strength to rip open the wound for the world to see? Or would I let their lies define the narrative forever? The cursor blinked. My hands hovered. And I knew it. The next move I made wouldn't just protect my business. It would determine the rest of my life. The cursor blinked back at me like it was daring me to act. For hours I sat in my little Asheville apartment staring at that blank page, my chest tight, my hands trembling above the keys. I was terrified, not of my family's lies, not even of the fallout, but of my own silence. Because if I let them control the story any longer, if I let their poison pass for truth, then they would win. Not because they had facts, but because I gave them mine and let them bury it. So I started typing. I wrote everything. I wrote about the $45,000 marketing contract I had sacrificed to save our failing grocery business. I wrote about the late nights, the flyers, the grassroots ads, the negotiations with vendors that pulled us back from bankruptcy. I explained how all of that had been stolen when my parents anointed Daniel manager, erasing my role entirely. I wrote about the wedding, my $10,000 drained into something I never wanted because I thought it might finally earn me their recognition. Every demand Daniel hurled, every dismissal from my mother's lips, the final words at that dining table. The greatest gift is you vanishing from this family forever. I wrote about leaving, about the chaos, about finding strength in Asheville. I didn't sugarcoat it. I poured in every wound, every scar, every flicker of truth they had tried to hide beneath shame. By the time I finished, my body ached, my eyes were swollen, and dawn was curling pale light into the sky. But the story was written, raw and whole. Still, I hovered. Posting it meant unleashing it all. Not just for me, but for anyone who read it. If they doubted me, fine. If they mocked me, fine. If they believed me, then maybe, finally, I could reclaim what was mine. So I clicked publish. Within hours, it was out, posted on a popular platform Shirley had recommended, linked across Asheville's local networks, even tagged in client newsletters. My title was simple, unflinching. The truth about the Carson family. At first, silence. Then the flood came. Comments rolled in. Messages. Texts from strangers in Asheville. Emails from readers across the country. Some were from people who admitted they'd seen the rumors and wondered. Now they saw a very different story. Others, perfect strangers, poured their support into every word. I've been the scapegoat. 2. This resonates so deeply. You deserved better. And I'm so glad you built new. The bakery became a hub. Locals who had seen the article stopped in to tell Shirley. Tell Maya we read it. Clients emailed variations of the same line. We trust you even more now. Because the truth wasn't shameful. It wasn't humiliation. It was survival. It was resilience. And people recognized it. Of course, Erie didn't stay quiet. Daniel posted a furious rebuttal online, claiming my piece was nothing but delusions of a bitter sister. My mother replied beneath it, devastated, claiming I was twisting reality to make them look cruel. The same handful of locals echoed their side. But for the first time, they weren't the loudest voices. They were drowned out by waves of strangers and community members who saw through them. For every lie they tossed, 10 people wrote back, "Your daughter saved you. Your daughter owes you nothing. She's free. and just like that, the balance shifted. For years, the Carsons had controlled the narrative. They had bent it until my reflection was unrecognizable. But with one story, one public declaration, they no longer held the pen. Blue Peak Creative thrived. Instead of costing me clients, the truth rallied them closer. Small business owners appreciated me more for my honesty, my grit. They saw themselves in my fight. The way people dismissed their value, underestimated their work, demanded their sacrifice. My business doubled in months. Soon, I hired the graphic designer who had been helping me, and then a copywriter eager to grow with us. For the first time, I wasn't a lone hustler. I was building something permanent, but beyond the success, beyond the numbers, came something more unexpected: peace. Because telling my story out loud broke the last chain. My family's words could no longer twist inside me in the dark. Their script was exposed to daylight, and it shriveled there. Shirley hugged me hard the night the story passed 50,000 views online. "You've burned the old house for good now," she chuckled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "And look how bright the light is." Nathan, calling from Erie, said simply, "You won, Maya, not because you destroyed them. Because you chose yourself." As for Daniel, as for Joyce and Leonard, their empire collapsed long ago. Their grocery store was gone, their reputations cracked, their smugness stripped away. They were shells of who they pretended to be, finally exposed as ordinary, flawed, vindictive people clinging to a golden lie. And maybe, just maybe, losing me was the one blow they couldn't recover from. But here's the truth. I didn't win by crushing them. I won by refusing to carry them anymore. The night everything settled, the night I realized the storm had passed, I walked through Asheville's downtown under string lights. The Blue Ridge peaks faint in the distance. Groups laughed outside breweries. Musicians strummed banjos near the market pavilion. My business name glowed modestly on new signage above a shared office space. And for once, standing there, no part of me wanted them to see it. No part of me wanted Joyce's approval, Leonard's nod, or Daniel's reluctant admission that maybe I had been more than okay. For once, their absence wasn't an ache. It was freedom. So if you're wondering how it ends, it doesn't end with reconciliation. It doesn't end with a family hug or a golden boy brother finally saying sorry. It ends here, with me learning that walking away wasn't the tragedy. Staying would have been, because sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is choose yourself, and I did. And I will. Always. How did you feel about this story? Tell me which country and city you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.